Hello. We've already had a driver drop out, which is an amazing start to you today. But you have got some Formula Overtake Racing League action on your hands. It's Season 1, Tier 2, Round 2 at Spa-Francorchamps. Usually always a treat to commentate at this circuit. Hopefully that stays true here today, as over the next moment or so you'll hear me close all my windows and that, just so I can actually get the best audio for you lot as possible. But anyways, you've got 14 drivers on the grid for today. Hello, hopefully these drivers will all be out on track within a moment's time. Gives them a chance to make some setups. As you can see, quite a bit of action in that McLaren garage. It looks like both cars ready to come out of the pit lane, maybe in a 1-2 formation, as they could be utilising the tow with one another. As out of the pits comes Sam, and then Gaddux comes along quite swiftly behind them. But there's a V-Carb, Haas, all sorts, all working their way out on track. So it's going to be a fairly busy qualifying session already, just with about 4 or 5 cars all limping down that pit lane within the first minute, just showing how eager these drivers are to get racing here today. As the driver leading the field is this V-Carb of him, as they work their way down the Kennel Straight up towards turn 4, as off that V-Carb goes. Quite unfortunate, but anyways, that now passes the lead over to Luke Dom. As you'll just hear some typing over the next moment or so as I get the track map up for you lot. Didn't have too much time to prep for this. However, they're going through Double Gauche now, also known as Pouon, if you aren't too familiar with these circuits. And they work their way through Les Fals, as up towards Stablo, which is this double right-hander part. However, Luke just getting all that final bits of tyre prep in the bag before he can go full push on a hot lap tour of this Spa-Francorchamps circuit, as they now go through Blanchimont as they head up towards the infamous bus stop chicane. Battery full to the brim. Let's see how little they will have come the end of this lap. You'd be looking at a 142 for a decent banker. As up towards turn 1, Luke goes heavy on brakes for La Source just after the 100 bollard, just slightly understeering past that apex. However, it sets him up quite nicely for the run down the hill through the valley up towards Radion de la Rouge. If you're unfamiliar, Eau Rouge is that small little left kink at the start. Radion's the larger part, as now DRS and battery being utilised down the Kemmel Straight up towards Le Combs. They go. It's a 30.7 after the first sector. It's not bad to say at least. However, it's best of all slightly dipping a wheel into the gravel trap there, giving the track limits a little trim to say the least. However, through Bruxelles they go as we enter Speaker's Corner. I'm basically giving you a little track guide with this banker run, because let's be honest, this won't be the quickest lap you'll see all session, as then it's Pouon. Try and keep it as flat as possible as you now work your way down to Les Fals. I'm not French, so I'm going to butcher that quite horrendously, as Harvey and Forzies have retired from session. Down to Campus, the right-hander. Then the following right-hander is your well-known Stablo Corner, which really does set up this forest section, going flat out all the way up through Blanchimont, which is that left, and then up towards bus stop chicane. 14% battery left, but it's all been depleted, so They are in a rather stiffy situation as they now leave the bus stop chicane up towards the line. Now it's going to be a 44.6 to put down a banker here. Of course, a fairly big mistake, but him does a 46.7, as then it's Sam to cross the line in that McLaren. It's 43.3. Then you've got Gadu heading out of that final corner. What can that McLaren do? It's going to be about 7 tenths slower than their own teammates, as you've got C Boogie and Eclipse leaving that final corner over the line. It will be a 47.9. Doesn't look like too competitive a lap. May go for another one after this, as Boogie leaves that final corner over the line. It's a 44.9 for that Alpine. Growing strong, now going rather deep, really getting that final bit of prep for their hot lapping. As up towards turn 1 they go. It's a 2-minute 2 run, but it was a double installation lap just to get those extra temps in, as that Aston really isn't pushing much, going quite deep there. Doesn't look like they want to burn too much. However, you can see on the bottom of your screen that they are using hot lap mode, but almost driving full assist as they go bumper car off the wall, as they do a little bit of weaving down that killer straight. I think they just want to end their session already, and we aren't even 7 minutes into it. But we can tune in with Bairden as up towards Rajon de La Rouge the Ferraris go. Battery being used, as you could see, that yellow flag for Oscar Piastri V2. And ironically they aren't in the McLaren, instead that Ferrari, but they are really dropping speed up towards the Lecom, trying to give their teammate that little bit of a tow, which could slingshot them through this chicane segment, really allow them to use as much corners as possible. And then that little slingshot down into Bruxelles as Bairden continues their lap through the left-hander. Don't go too wide, otherwise that gravel trap will speak for you and maybe put you out into that wall, if lucky beach it, as then it is an invalidated lap there for the Ferrari. They have immediately backed off. Whether or not they opt for another fast run, only time will tell. As growing strong now entering that bus stop chicane. I really don't think this is too competitive whatsoever. Into the pits they go, ever so slightly missing that pit entry, kind of inventing their new formation of it, as the Ferrari getting back underway. As into the final 2 corners they go. You've got Oscar, who's dived into the pits, so will their teammate. They'll probably recuperate, rethink about how to attack that Pouon segment, because let's be honest, that Ferrari did go a bit too all out, and therefore it really stung them in the back. However, we've got Ginge going through Les Valles up towards the end of the middle sector. They now go in that V-Carb. The V-Carb team currently sitting in 8th and 10th. However, you've got just less than 10 minutes remaining. Literally started making my last statement as it ticked over. However, the V-Carb trying to use all they've got no battery, so it's all going to be out about the corner exit, almost like it is F2 cars here today, which is an ideal massive moment there with the rear end up towards the line. They are going to go. It's going to be an improvement from the 2-minute 2. It's only a 1:45.5, however, as you can now get Barros going rather slow out on track. Quite a few cars making their way round for an outlap. It's about 2 minutes or so for an outlap and in-lap each, so 4 minutes occupied by that, then about 1 minute and 50 seconds to do a flyer, just putting a little caveat on it. So roughly every run is 6 minutes long, so it's either you constantly come in and out, do 1 hot lap in each stint, or you try and do 2 stints where you do 2 installation laps, a hot lap then an in lap. but it's really difficult to get 3 laps in such a compact session on such a large circuit. As now the man currently lining up in P3 here, the McLaren currently putting themselves in a rather good position. For context, after the first race they did bag P1 and P4, so it's a no-brainer that they are at the top end of this championship. They've got 19 points in hand over Red Bull at the moment, as they leave the final corner to start their second run of the day. As Gadux heads up towards turn 1, the McLaren brakes just after the 100, just kisses that apex in La Source, as now down the hill they go once again, as into Radion de La Rouge they go. They will pin that foot to the throttle, just slightly manoeuvre that car through the uphill S. It's more of an inverted S, but hey ho, as down the Kemmel Straight they go. 50% battery left for the final 2 sectors. It's about 3/10 improvement, closer to that quarter mark. However, it's now down the hill into Bruxelles. The McLaren braking fairly early, taking a bit of grass with him. That's going to really chuck him like a banana, as if this was Mario Kart. As now down towards Pouin they go. 55 or so seconds it took them to get that far. They've only got about 55 seconds left to complete their lap in a speedy fashion, as through the downhill segment is such a big circuit in terms of elevation. Of course, that massive uphill bit for Radion de La Rouge, and then it's all downhill. However, it's 3/4 of a second being found at the moment. It could be provisional pole here for the McLaren as they work their way through Blanchimont now up towards the bus stop chicane. They're going to deplete some battery just so they have enough to have that little dash up towards the finish line. On the exit of the final corner now, it's all about getting throttle down, battery and DRS being used over the line. It's an absolute best lap of this session. However, Sam is also on a run. Looks like they're a whole second up from where they currently are. It does look like they are going to put a hole between them and their teammates as over the line. It's a 42.0, very close to be a 42.1 flat. However, 1,000th of a second below that caveat, as Bearden at the end of the first sector to 30.7. It's looking promising, maybe around P4 based off the other drivers which we have seen today. As down the hill, trying to keep it all reined in. Let's hope they do not make the same mistake they made a lap or so ago in Pouin, as they now work their way down to that double left hand. It's all high speed. Slight lift off is advised, but the Ferrari stays fully committed. Battery being deployed as they go towards the chicane now. Just kiss that apex, shimmy the car out wide, and then hit that other one a bit more recklessly, just to really try and keep that momentum going as they work their way down the hill. It's an absolute best middle sector, it says. However, the game hasn't actually got a full lap for him registered, as there's an Aston Martin of growing strong, not really acting too strongly in terms of getting out of the way for a car on a flyer. However, the Ferrari now through the bus stop chicane, it's looking reassuring for the Scuderias. Over the line they now go. It's a 42.5. I think that's the closest anyone has in fact been to Sam all session long, so do keep an eye out on them, as Eclipse is close to starting another flyer. Let's see what the McLarens in fact do. Gadux into the pit lane. Sam also entering the bus stop chicane. Looks like that McLaren is also heading in. Eclipse also darting in. Who else could we look at? We've got Ginge in that V-Carb, currently sitting 9th here. The two V-Carbs piled together out on track, as at the end of that first sector it's not going to be anything representable whatsoever. 2.5 seconds down as Boogie leaves that final corner now. They are going to work their way up towards the La Source to try and set up a really nice lap here, as it's all going to be about their run down a hill. They've compromised it, getting a bit too close to that inside barrier, so it's going to be all pressure now for that Alpine. Will they be able to cope as they now work their way up the hill, increasing their altitude? Usually low air pressure, more difficult to breathe, but Boogie is just going to keep it all calm and composed as they now work down the Kemmel Straight up towards the Lacombs in that Alpine. It's 2 tenths improvement. Good regarding that massive hiccup in the first corner, but they will continue to power on as the Ferrari is again disconnected through Bruxelles, really attacking that inside curve now, just moving the car nice and smoothly to the outsides, really setting them up nicely for the following corners up towards Huon. They go, don't want to get too high on that entry curve, but anyways, powering down the hill now. It's looking very good for the Alpine at the moment. Just have to keep it clean for the final sector, which is literally round the next corner as they go through campus, just hitting that white line, keeping it in track limit. It's 3 tenths improvement, and now it's powering out of Stavelot up towards Blanchimont now under that Las Vegas barrier sign as they continue to march on. What lap will this be, however, for the Alpine? It's looking good to maybe promote themselves into that top 6 as they now wrestle that car through the bus stop chicane up towards the line now. It's going to be a 44.5. It's enough for P7 in this session, as Hin, it says after the first sector, about a 1/10.5 off of their best lap so far out of campus. They go, they're really backing out. It's 2.7 down from their current provisional best of a 45.789, which is a shame, but I'm pretty sure that V-Carb is going to be charging on in a moment's time. They do have 100% battery in store, but they've entered low fuel mode, so I don't know why they are planning to go for a flyer. They aren't going to be able to get too far, as we have got, I believe it's Barros, yes it is, entering that bus stop chicane, getting those rear tyres all nice and warm. You could see that rear locking entering that chicane. Anyways, up towards the La Source they now go. Eclipse has said that's his session over and done with. P11 is the highest they will be able to start, so will Hin and Ginge. That's 9th and 10th for them now as Barros works their way down the hill up through Radion de la Rouge now. 60% of battery to still play around with. How much will they utilise down this back straight? It's all about the top speed, but that is the joy of this circuit, especially that massive dash down that Kemmel Straight through the comms at the end of the first sector. It's 34 thousandths of a second improvement so far. That's now down the hill. You just get yourself so elevated in that first sector just to go flying down that hill, almost as if you're on a tobogganing run. But anyways, through on now, slightly attacking that outside curve, trying to use the full width of this track where possible, as they're going to continue to march on through the left hand and now down towards campus. What will it be after the first 2 sectors? It's definitely up. It's only a 1,000th quicker than their best middle sector. It's only 35 thousandths up from their current best lap. They still need a good 6 tenths or so to split up those McLarens to put one down into P4 here. As up towards the bus stop chicane, will they be able to park that bus nicely? Yes, they will. Through the right, then the left, trying to hold it all tight, getting a bit squirrelish on that exit. Over the line, it's going to be a 43.9 here, as you've got Sam going slow. Could he maybe be giving their teammate a tow? As you can see, Gadoot entering that final sector, and just up ahead is their teammate of Sam, who's now picked up the speed in that Papaya McLaren. They're going to drag them through Blanchimont and then get out of the way, slingshot them up to the bus stop chicane. I think they've gone slightly deep there. Yes, they have just slightly missed that exit curve. As up towards the line now. It's going to be a 43.1. It's not enough to put a McLaren front row lockout, as Boogie has invalidated their run. So it will be Sam who gets pole position, your current championship leader, holding that upper hand. Then second on grid is a Ferrari of Bed, and then Gadux, followed by Barros in P4. But trust me, we are in for a treat here today. McLaren, Ferrari, McLaren is your top three, but it's almost like a checkered flag throughout the thing. Can you turn full track map on, please? It was on throughout qualifying, as Sam is your man on provisional pole, Bed in second, Gadux third, Barros in fourth, then Oscar Piastri V2 in fifth, Strawberry in sixth, Boogie seventh, Luke Dom 8th, Ginge 9th, Formula Hin in 10th for that qualifying session. As it's now 21 past the hour, we are going to be underway. I wanted to say around 23 minutes past for a good 22 laps of this Spa-Francorchamps, which is a very long track. It's a big track in terms of attrition, because it is quite relentless on the body. 22 laps, where every lap is about a minute and 47 seconds in race trim. It does drag along quite a bit, and there's only 2 DRS zones, those of which heading up towards the La Source, which is your run to turn 1, that you can see just about half of your grid lined up on, and then down that Kemmel straight up towards the Lacombe. But irrespective of that, this is a chance for the drivers to make tweaks to their setups where possible and pick their strategies, as the lights are now up for your formation lap. Here today we will now confirm what compounds everyone will be using. It's a unanimous decision by the field to go for the medium compounded tyres here today. It looks like it's going to be a rather straightforward run to the line. No one opting for those hard compounded tyres. However, from my experience in league racing, there was once I went here, got a bit of front wing damage on your opening lap, and then went 21 laps on the hard compounder tyres, still setting personal best laps in the late teens. Around lap 18 I set fastest lap of race, came third that race. So it's not impossible to go to the end from lap 1 on a set of hard compounder tyres, but does anyone have the guts to do so, or give them a massive undercut, especially if they break off some of their front wing in the opening lap? But it's all about, do you want to forfeit that time so early on, or do you want to fight it out on track? As these drivers now limping down this circuit, getting those tyre temps up in those mediums. They're fairly easy to heat up, I'd like to say, as Gadux and Luke have made contact, thus sending them back to the grid boxes in the worst position in which they can be. So hopefully they are going to work their way backwards into turn 1 and really spice things up, especially for that McLaren. Starting third could be crucial in terms of the constructors if they end up yielding a point or two to the likes of Red Bull or Ferrari because of that formation lap error. However, there's still 22 laps to rectify those subtle mistakes. But anyway, Sam leading the field around still. We will actually have a look at the back of the field for once. It's going to be Hin who's trailing the pack, even though there's 4 cars starting behind him, as that V-carb into the gravel trap there. But yeah, quite a vibrant pecking order here today. You've got Red Bulls all looking fairly racy. They had a fairly decent qualifying regarding 4th and 6th on the grid. However, McLaren do definitely seem like the team to beat here today, as they now work their way up to the chicane, as it's all going to be about whether or not they can park it between a free white lined box, as you could see, leaving the bus stop chicane, though the back grid slot, as now the McLaren lines up on the grid of Ferrari, just going through quite a few cars, just ghosting in where possible. As you can see how these cars are lining up for turn one. Sam really trying to push that car as close to the inside as possible, whereas the Ferrari looking straight on for the racing line into turn one. The lights now ticking up. Here today is 5 lights, and we are now underway here in Spa-Francorchamps. Sam gets a good start compared to Bearden, who's going backwards as Barrios down the inside. The Red Bull trying to pull off some heroics, as it's going to be P2 out of turn one. There's a yellow flag out on track. It's a V-carb that's off in that wall in the source as they work their way up the hill now. Barros in P2, an amazing start for the Ferrari and Red Bull as they continue to fight down the Kemmel Straight now. Barros are looking to the inside of the Ferrari. Will the Red Bull push themselves up into the race lead here? They go through Lecom, a bit of contact, and there's Sam going around the outside in Malmedy, and that is why the McLaren has reworked themselves into that top two. However, the fight is not over there. The Red Bull going to continue to pile that pressure on as they now work their way down the hill. You can see quite a few cars trying to make a statement in Speaker's Corner now through Pouon now, as Bearden running away with this race already, 7 tenths clear, but that's just the dirty air kicking in as Hin going a fair bit wide. I think he's taking a hint due to that wing damage. That V-car really not looking too competitive whatsoever today, but due to the havoc of the start, turn one is naturally a carbon fibre zone, just due to the angle of that first corner being such a heavy hairpin. You're almost guaranteed to get a crash there, as there's Sam back to the outside of the Ferrari, and that is first to third into turn one, and back up to first before the end of the first lap. However, Bearden in that Ferrari is going to try and make life as difficult as possible. To the outside for turn one goes Bearden. They're going to try and pull off the switchback as they now work their way down the hill up towards Rajon de la Rouge now. We've seen numerous icons like Mark Webber pull off moves through here. The Ferrari chooses to play it all safe, as now DRS comes into play for the first time this race. To the outside they're going to go. Sam practically left defenceless there as Forzies has gone off somewhere. We can see that just off in the corner. Big shunt in the wall there. Kind of reminds me of Juan Manuel Correa in F2 back in 2019. Led to the death of the late Antoine Hubert, who is still memorised to this day as a possible new Hamilton. But that story is for another day. Anyway, Sam working down to the chicane as the McLaren probably going to start getting a bit impatient. Yes, it's only lap 1, but the lap is just so long. It's such a dirty air fest is the best way to put it, because you're following so closely to the car ahead for so much of your racing lap. As now up towards the bus stop chicane now, detection point just up ahead. They're going to try and not overtake, which they will succeed in doing, and then through the bus stop chicane it's going to be all guns blazing. As now up towards turn 1, Sam's going to get DRS on the Ferrari. They're looking to the inside as Barros sets fastest lap. Sam versus Bearden, take 2 in this race, and it's going to be Sam that leads out of turn 1 this time. Down the hill it's going to be the Ferrari that gets DRS, but they're going to try and look to make a move into Rajon de la Rouge. They do it just before that corner. Could be a bit of mutual respect from drivers not willing to risk it going wheel to wheel there, regarding they are both still in this title fight in an early stage, of course, coming in first and second, I believe it was, a week ago. No, first and third, in fact. That's my mistake, as Sam works his way down the hill. Of course, if you hear clicking of the mouse, that's me just flicking over to some standings graphics. I do have a noise cancelling mic, but in a rush, so sorry for that. As Sam works his way down towards Pouron, the McLaren now just rethinking of a way to overtake. He tried overtaking into the bus stop chicane at the end of lap 1. He was overtaken into Lecombe on lap 2. He tried then overtaking into La Source on lap 3. It was again overtaken into Lecombe on lap 3. So maybe this lap, does he hold off into the source and maybe try and get that overtake done into Lecombe, then pull away in that McLaren, just because he does look so much more comfortable in that Papaya car than the man in the Scuderia outfit. As to the outside for the bus stop chicane, they are going to go. Sam trying to set up a move once again, trying to take those wider lines, really set him up for the run up towards turn 1. You can see the IBM rear wing get closer and closer as the McLaren pulls to the outside this time. They're going to go deep into turn 1, keeps it within track limits. However, they're going to be behind entering this DRS zone this time round, which will be absolutely mega for the McLaren. You can see Gadux just in the background slowly chiming themselves back into this race, so do not go anywhere because it could become a four-way fight for the lead, as Sam to the inside and finally past that Ferrari. For how long though can they pull away in that middle sector, or do they have to try and fend off in the next lap or so? It's fairly difficult to pull out such a lead in one lap. It could get to 9/10 and then fluctuate there a bit before they do break a second, or they could just straight up do it in one lap and smash the field. But at the moment, Ferrari doing a fairly good job at staying in touching distance, currently half a second entering the chicane, as now continuing their trip down the hill before their uphill climb into Lecombe, really, because it is slightly uphill going through Blanchimont and the bus stop chicane. The breaking point of the final corner is quite a heavy elevation. Same said about La Source, but this is all the uphill part. Then it all just goes downhill from there once you've hit your peak on the exit of the Kemmel Straight. As there's Sam, he's 7/10 clear of the Ferrari. It becomes about 9/10, as I did bring up, leaving that bus stop chicane as Oscar has a left session again. It's been fairly abysmal in terms of their connection status here today, as now the Ferrari, they're going to be behind the McLaren once again as they go through Rayon de la Rouge. Don't want to pick up too much dirty air, try and keep the car as pinned down to the ground as possible. They're mighty close, however, within a 10.5. They'll pull to the inside and overtake Sam for the race lead once again, as that is a nice and easy move made for the Ferrari driver. They'll just keep powering on in this race, and I think this could be a very much back and forth duel for the time being until one of them does break out from DRS range. However, we can have a little look a bit further back in the field to see Harvey Lee and Boogie going head to head here. The Haas car versus the Alpine. It does look like that Haas is carrying some end plate damage. If you look going through Speaker's Corner on the outside of that Haas car, there was a missing front wing end plate, so they will be dragging through that middle sector with less downforce on the car. However, it will make their lives ever so slightly more simplistic in the DRS zones. They'll get a bit more top speed with that limited downforce. But you can look a bit further back to see the two V-Carbs and Aston Martin kind of biting each other's tongues off a bit as they are continuing to fight. But there's him who goes wide through Pouron as the top two re-enter the run to turn 1. Bairden getting quite close again in that Ferrari through the source. They both go deep off that apex, just trying to really get as much top speed as possible as they go down that hill, take that wider line, more traction on the exit. Kind of gives them that little boost, as if it's a mushroom from Mario Kart. As on the outside of Kemmel, they go down the Kemmel straight now. The Ferrari back up into the lead here, as there's Red Bull darting to the inside to defend against the McLaren. The McLaren just stays put and walks on through. The door opened and they just invited themselves in to that podium now. So Gadux and Sam both operating in the top 3. Whether or not they'll be able to put it, both cars, into the top 2 and bag the first 1-2 of this Tier 2 season. Quite a lot of 2s being brought in, but it could be a massive statement in only the second race of this campaign for that McLaren side, as they now work their way down the hill once again. Nothing really happening between these lot at the moment. We will probably wait a lap or so before any proper duels go away, but you can see that Sam getting closer and closer. These mediums probably would want to be taken off around lap 8 or so, as there's Bearden into the pits in that Ferrari, only on lap 5. A fairly early pit stop in my books, but could it be useful, as also Barros has opted to take a stop in this race. The 2 drivers just sitting in an awkward position, having the 2 McLarens kind of dominating that lead fight. Now trying to go for an offset strategy. Barros putting on the hard compounded tyres, whereas Bearden going for a set of mediums. As you can see, Sam just working their way up towards the com. The chase is very much on in this race now, as I believe you've got both V-carbs still powering on to the 7th lap here today. Hin has already pitted, whereas Ginge I don't think has. Actually, they may have done it on the inaugural lap, just based off the way they've got one less laps usage on those tyres. As now onto the Kemmel straight they will go, the 2 V-carbs in DRS range of one another. Whether or not they will pounce and try and swap positions, time will tell, but Hin closes in on Ginge. No move made there, as they're now going to go down the hill, as it does look like Ginge is just pulling away from their teammate in this race. As Bairden in the Ferrari, 3-second time penalty, 4 track limits infringements. That's going to take a fairly heavy toll, but you do now have 5 drivers in this race with at least 1 infringement. Hin grabbing another one. I believe they're on multiple. Yeah, they're on 12 seconds on the 8th lap. That's more than 1 second a lap in this race, and we aren't even at half distance. As there's the V-carb, who's gone fairly wide and into that barrier. Luckily they caught him, and they're still underway. But you can have a look just a bit further back. You've got Strawberry just hanging on to DRS range. Could they be in optimal position to try and attack against the Haas as they work their way down the Kemmel straight now? They've got that button in use. You saw that they pressed it, but they're just a bit too far back. So your next best bet is Barros on the other Haas car of Harvey. To the outside goes Red Bull, and that's an easy move up into P6 now. Then Bearden really making this undercut worth his time, as they're putting pressure under Strawberry. They push that Red Bull nice and wide by putting pressure, forcing them to the inside line, and that's job well done for the Ferrari. And now it's practically race on, as Hin has retired, and it's the safety car out on track. I believe that V-Carb has had an offing in the Radion de la Rouge complex. I think it's similar manner to how Forzy's has crashed out. But now Sam and Gadux both get a free stop. You can see the two, not Ferraris, the two McLarens dropping back. You crashed in Eau Rouge. No, you crashed in Radion. Eau Rouge is the left kink at the start of it. Radion is the main bulk, that right hand into the left. But it's all labelled Radion de la Rouge if you were to pronounce it in French, which is the more traditional formation of that corner complex. As Bearden and Barros will be overtaking Gadux in this race. Do feel free to tell me if I'm pronouncing your names wrong. I'm not going to be one of those cocky people. Anyways, Bearden working their way up the hill. That lower corner, the very start of it, is your Eau Rouge. Then that more uphill bit is Radion, for your context hint. I'm saying that because I've got the track map up. But yeah, Sam in first as things stand. So whether or not yeah, I keep being asked to commentate the DLR. Races are 2 AM for me. Just for you guys is getting a reason as to why I'm kind of going a bit ghost here. But I've been asked by about 7 people today. But yeah, they race at 7 PM EST. That's 2 AM here in the UK. But yeah, I usually don't turn down commentary, but when times really don't work, they don't work. Whereas this is a lovely event. I've got nothing planned on the Tuesday, and we've seen such amazing racing so far. Eclipse, the safety car, came out due to him crashing out on the exit of Radion, and pretty much, yeah. That's a good way to put it, Bearden. Him retired. But yeah, it does, if we were to think about it, Forzy's retired in the same manner. No safety car. I think Hin must have took a heavier hit. How do you crash in Eau Rouge? Says Bearden. It wasn't Eau Rouge, it was Radion. I'm going to be saying that so much in this race. But yeah, Radion's that second bit. Eau Rouge is the first bit. So yeah, as you see, if I was to go on board with Sam, yes, this is a little educational lesson as they go down the hill. This left hand Sam's taking is Eau Rouge, then the right into the left is your Radion complex. A very good example for the McLaren. Thank you for being my little test subject. Anyways, down the Kemmel Straight, they all go in formation under the safety car. As tier 2 standings, just for you lot, fill up this void. So, as things stand, 7 constructors have scored at least 4 points, whereas the other 3 have scored nil. Those 3 being Haas, Sauber and Williams. Unfortunately, no Sauber or Williams drivers today, so there will be no points added to them. However, in terms of Haas, currently sitting in 4th and 7th, rather interesting strategies for them, to say at least. A set of soft compound of tyres is on Luke's car, probably saying he's going to pit around lap 14 or whatever. and then I'd say take the hards to the end. But whatever happens, it looks quite reassuring that they will bag at least 1 point in this race and kickstart their campaign. Then it's Alpine on 4 points in 7th. They're currently sitting 8th and 9th this race, so if they were to finish where they are, they'd have over doubled their points tally entering this race after this race. Then for Racing Bulls, they've got 1 driver remaining in this race and they've got 6 points currently in their title campaign. I'll be honest, based off how they've been doing this weekend, I won't be surprised if they get anything less than 9th, because it's really not been a circuit made for the drivers. And then in terms of Aston Martin, you've got Growing Strong, who I think's shrinking to become quite weak more than anything, as they were about 6 seconds off of the rest of the field in qualifying. And then they're still in their own man's land. They're 31 seconds off the field, and we've been under safety car for about 4 laps now, as these drivers really just trying to keep these tyre attempts alive but not overdo it, so they are so weak on that restart. But then in 4th in the constructors, it's Mercedes on 10 points. Neither Mercedes are racing, so do anticipate them to go southbound in this championship. Then this is where it starts getting heated up a bit, because Ferrari and Red Bull 3 points apart entering this race. If things were to finish now, that would flip on its head, because Red Bull sitting in 3rd and 6th on track, Ferrari's in 2nd and 11th on track now, as Oscar Piastri has got 10 seconds for a severe collision with Eclipse. I think that's more just giving him a love tap in the rear end under that safety car, leaving Radion de la Rouge. But currently entering this race, Ferrari's on 15 and Red Bull's on 18. Red Bull's going to be extending that, not actually flipping on its head. That's my mistake. I read it as Red Bull on 15. Anyways, you could see Bairden kind of giving message going, hurry up please safety car, I want to go racing, just based off the way he was going to the outside in Bruxelles, almost as if he wanted to overtake. Then you've seen quite a dominant display out of McLaren today. 1st and 3rd in qualifying, they've ran pretty much the whole race with both cars in the top 4. The only time they haven't had that is of course Gadux under this safety car, as 37 points for them in that season opener. As things stand, they're bringing home another 35 points. So that does look like the championship's going to McLaren, just like it has done in real life. Of course, on the weekend just gone, a bit of McLaren controversy, but they sealed their 10th constructors. Here, McLaren look like sealing their first Tier 2 constructors. But for those who have literally just joined, you have joined in time for the restart of this race. Lap 11 going on to lap 12. McLaren look like the team to beat. However, you've got some outliers of soft compound runners. For example, Luke in P4. However, it's all up to Sam on when he runs, as long as the safety car is fully in that pit entry and that they go before the finish line. It's all fair, as now they pounce out of the final corner up towards the La Source. They go now. We are back underway in this race. Bairden looking to the inside of the McLaren. Thought there may have been a move, but obviously not to come in this race, as there's the Haas just sitting in the background, still looking quite racy on those soft compounder tyres. However, the Ferrari trying to push the McLaren up the hill through Radion de la Rouge. That's just the difference in compound, the mediums against the hards, as there's Bairden racing straight past the McLaren down the Kemmel straight up towards the Lecombe. Now is Sam going to be able to defend on the outside? The McLaren unfortunately looks completely defenceless, as now the Ferrari is your racer leader once again. It's practically been back and forth since the opening lap here between these two, almost like someone's playing with a yo-yo, and it's just changing every time. they go down that Kemmel Straight. However, down towards Pouon, it does look like Ferrari have had a much better restart procedure than the McLarens. Gadux unfortunately hasn't been able to make a move on Luke, and Sam's dropped a place to Bairden just like he did so on the opening lap of this race. They then went to overtake him into the bus stop chicane, only to get re-overtaken into the Kemmel Straight on the following lap. Does that happen again? Probably not, because that gap is now 9/10 in the favour of the Scuderia. An amazing restart for Bairden as they now approach the bus stop chicane for the 12th time in this race. Heavy on the brakes, try and keep it all under pressure. No one wants to make a big mistake. There's now up towards the La Source. They go. DRS is now enabled in this race up towards turn 1. That McLaren trying to stay as close as possible to see if they can try and launch themselves out of Radion de la Rouge and attempt at making a move. However, they are 1.034 behind from the Ferrari going over that detection point. They will be without DRS this lap, if I'm right. Yes, they are in that DRS zone, and no rear wing has opened. However, you can look a bit further back, and there's Luke sideswiping Boogie into that wall, and that's allowed Ginge in the V car to make some ground up into P7. Now they even find a small gap on that TAS and try to assert some dominance by overtaking in that V car, promoting themselves into 6th. However, it's not time yet. Luke, of course, you could tell just how aggressive they were trying to defend against Boogie, that they don't really want to give up that 6th place too much. Maybe a mistake in the strategy, of course. Those softs is rather ludicrous to think about being used in a 22 lap race around this lengthy circuit. However, that's their strategic choice. They can't fault the strategy, because that's Ferrari's job to get it all wrong. However, now that has to either try and skin and bear it, or take a massive knock and drop outside the point and then try and recover it all. As there's Luke to the inside of Strawberry, parking it on the exit there to defend against Strawberry. They do get the move done. However, you've got Sam now back within DRS range of Bairden as they now work their way down the hill, then straight back up the hill through Radion de la Rouge, as onto the Kemmel Straight they go now. They are 1.1 out. However, you can see that DRS is wide open with that rear wing. And then back in the background is Barros versus Gadux. Gadux to the outside of Barros. Can they get the move done in the com? No, they won't. They will instead back out and make life easy for the Red Bull. However, Strawberry is forcing Luke into a mistake. Then Luke kind of goes offline and then rejoins it quite erratically into Strawberry. Then Strawberry goes, you know what? I'm going to force my way through, and promotes themselves up into 6th by possibly, if the studs call it that way, forcing another driver off the track. However, you can argue that there was some dangerous driving in play by that Haas as they launch it into Pouon, lob the Red Bull off the road, and promote themselves up into P6. Not the finest of displays for the Haas driver here today. I think it's the soft compounder tyres getting into their head a wee bit, as it must be frustrating trying to fight everyone on such better compounds with a pair of softs that degrade within 5 laps. But there's a big mistake from Strawberry. I think it's getting into the Red Bull's head as they've gone off there as they go through Corporal Frere. And now Blanchimont up towards bus stop chicane they go. But that's the Red Bull down the pecking order, and Sam is closer than they were last lap, only by about 200ths of a second over that detection point. Not much whatsoever, but now onto the Kemmel Straight. They are within a second. They will use the RS to try and close up to the back of Bairden in the Ferrari. You've not got too long left in this race. However, will those mediums hang on? I don't think they will, if I'm brutally honest. As Strawberry has pitted, so has Harvey Lee in that Haas and Red Bull, down in 10th and 11th as of now. They'll probably be undercutting Luke in this race. Get him out the way and then focus up on pushing upfield, as Sam is probably the closest we have seen since that restart to regaining the lead, as now through Les Faz as they work their way down to campus. As will McLaren be able to take home a win and take it back to their campus, or will it be the Ferraris taking the trophy back home to Maranello as they now continue to race up towards Blanchimont? Still Bairden leading away under that Las Vegas bridge. Unfortunately, it's not Las Vegas here today. It's of course Spa-Francorchamps if you are blind, but to the inside, maybe no. They will just settle in as there's Bairden into the pit lane, and Sam given the clean air. Great comms. Eclipse is asking if I can do this every week. I don't mind doing it every week. So yeah, I enjoy it. As Sam is now your race leader. There's Barros in second with Gaddux down in third place. At least both McLarens are onto the podium once again in this race. The last time we saw that was around lap 8. As now Barros has got some defending to do. The McLaren closing in. You can just see that silver front wing from the Silverstone chrome livery. They look to the outside, but Barros able to defend almost any manoeuvre which comes their way, as Luke has finally pitted. Where does that Haas come out, however? They're going to come out just behind Boogie. So it's going to be the two Alpines ahead of the Haas's. But for the sake of Strawberria, they're going to be under some pressure, as they've got Luke ahead of them. So there's a good chance they do end up clashing between now and the end of the race, as it's evident that the Red Bull car is quicker than that Haas car here today. A bit like how the McLaren cars are just quicker than the rest of the field. They've definitely been in a league of their own, as they now head up towards Stavlo once again. Gaddux just flirting with that 1 second margin. They're trying to keep it within, but there'll be those moments where Barros just gets that better exit and propels themselves further away. Eclipse 3 second track limits penalty, as there's Gaddux, who's got a really good run out of Blanchimont. Looks to the outside for the bus stop chicane, as I almost choke on my own words for a moment. As up towards the source, the McLaren closes in ever so slightly with that open rear wing due to DRS. Out of the source now, down towards Radion de la Rouge they go. The McLaren trying to use that toe, closing in as much as possible. We can just see through Radion de la Rouge just how much more traction that McLaren car gets, as DRS now on Barros. They're going to breeze past the Red Bull and up into P2 here today, lap 17 of 22, and that's an absolute best first sector for that McLaren car. It's almost like them brand spanking new softs, because that is a mega first sector to put themselves up into P2 if they can continue that momentum. Maybe it could be fastest lap of the race for the drivers in Papaya, but there's still quite a bit of time for that to be decided, as you do have a bit further back Luke just overtaking Boogie there in the Alpine, but Boogie's going to fight back against the Haas, and that's going to mean Luke has to back off and settle in for P8 once again. Boogie into P7, or stays into P7 is the better way to phrase it, because they never really lost that place. Yes, admittedly they got overtaken on the Kemmel Straight, but they regained the place in Malmedy, which is of course that right before they go down the hill to Bruxelles, which is that hairpin. But anyways, it's going to be Luke versus Boogie once again, as you can see based off the deltas the McLarens are now both at least a second clear of their closest rival. Gadux has broke DRS from Barros, leaving them in the dust. However, Bairden is on a set of hards and lapping quite nicely, I'll be honest. And I think this is the time where we change it to penalties so you can get a bit more context on how it's going to change the final outcome. For Strawberry, they'll be promoted to P9 as things stand. It's growing strong. Really just shrinking more and more as these laps go by. 37 seconds off of the Red Bull in P10 and 6 seconds to their name. As off goes Luke. It's not too drastic of a mistake, however they did go over that sausage curb, probably going to damage some of their flooring, lower their downforces. This lap is all about that downforce, of course. That Haas there just cutting Radion de la Rouge, making it quite clear they had no intent of making it, whether that's due to some form of damage on the car, but for the most part it looks fine as they've gone off once again there and then trimming every corner. It's almost like they're with no brakes, as now Harvey has caught up. Is Luke going to play nice? We haven't seen him play nice with anyone else this race, but I think with it being their teammate they have to play that team game, because Harvey is looking so much quicker, and I'll be honest, he could probably get Boogie in this race if they do that team game, but I'm not the one to dictate what happens out on the track. I'm just here to tell you what's going on, as there is Luke playing the team game as Harvey up into P8. It's almost like they're listening to my every word out on track. But now Harvey, 4 seconds to Boogie, and about 3 or so laps left in this race. If I'm right, it's 4 laps to go after this one, as there's Luke who goes straight into the back of their teammate. There's Harvey with that front wing missing now, and Strawberria has came straight back into this race, and they've gone into the back of Harvey. That's their wheel off, and now it's full yellows. Is it going to be the safety car, or is it just going to be the VSC? Into the pits comes Harvey. Great timing for him. However, at the moment, Luke is becoming a very big liability as Harvey gets 10 seconds for speeding into the pit lane. Full course safety car it is here. McLaren have been saved once again, because Bearden closing in on those hards. However, it's either they pit and stay in 4th, or they go straight up to 1st, but have the old compounds and probably be put in the weaker position. As now, race neutralised once again. But we've seen every single time that it does end up getting quite feisty out there. But now it's going to be all about what happens. Does Sam stay out, or does he pit? And if he pits, then that's probably going to send a domino effect down the entire field. Into the pits comes your race leader. He did it under last safety car, so it was kind of a no-brainer here. There's not long left. Gadux will follow their teammate in, but Barros is going to take the gamble in the Red Bull. They stay out on track. Into the pits comes Bearden even. The man who only pitted a matter of laps ago has now opted for a stop, whereas the Red Bull leading now chose to stay out. What's happened? I wasn't even driving. If you're Strawberria, let's say Luke Don assassinated Harvey, and then as a result Strawberria kind of ended up just becoming a passenger, but at the same time failed to avoid another car rejoining, so can kind of be faulted both ways. However, Eclipse has stayed out on the hard compounder tyres. Ginge in 6th, then Boogie into the pits. Luke stays out. I'd recommend these drivers get an amazing restart, otherwise they could be under some risk of having their own races ended. Like I was driving the final 2 laps in that case, yeah, you were the victim of Luke Dom's assassination attempt of their teammate, but it went wrong and sniped the wrong person. Is the nicest way to put it. Yeah, like, it's almost as if someone's practiced to take someone out in Fortnite for years on end, and then when it comes to the actual assassination attempt, they shoot the wrong person. That's kind of what's happened, as your best analogy. Dabby 2021. Not really. But, yeah. What the was Luke doing is a great way to put it, Bairden. Yeah, I think there'll be quite a lot of investigations after the race regarding that Haas car. Whether or not we'll see him next week, I don't know. As Forzy says, I got assassinated on lap 2. Was it by the Haas car of Luke? If so, then I do think he's just out there to kill. Alpine was P67. Oh, not by Haas, by Forzy. As safety cars underway, we are going to get 2 laps of racing here in Spa. Barros on 13 lap old hards, Eclipse on 11 lap old hards, Luke on 4 lap old mediums, growing strong, and Oscar not caught up, nor is Harvey. So it's really the top 8 still liable to win. It's most likely going to be one of those in top 4. They've been top 4 all race, but who will it be? Will it be the man who gambled to stay out? He's got 2 laps to try and defend, as he's now going to run. He's left it quite late, but it's all fair, as there's Eclipse who regains place on Ginge over that line due to some miscommunications as Sam goes slightly wide. It's all kicking off back there. Boogie getting pushed off by Ginge as Bearden's had an amazing start in that Ferrari, and Sam, just like the race start, has gone southbound. He's dropped place to his teammates and the Ferrari as they work their way down the Kemmel Straight. There's Luke overtaking Eclipse as Ginge going to the opposite side. They went 3 wide there, and Luke has somehow managed to come out successful, as now Bairden all over the back of Barros. He's going to go to the inside for Bruxelles, the Ferrari to the inside against the Red Bull, and that is job well done. However, there's still 3 seconds they have to try and pull out in this race, as there's Sam to the inside in Speaker's Corner. I think he's just spoke a very loud statement to his teammate that he is the number 1 and he's going to be the one gunning for the championship more than anyone else, as Boogie just having Ginge and Eclipse pretty much trying to go wheel to wheel into Pouron. That failed. However, Eclipse gambled the hards and he's plummeting down the field. Bairden 1.8 seconds clear of Barros in P2. That Red Bull's very much helping Sam in this race, as that McLaren is going to go to the outside out of Corporal Frere and ahead before Blanchimont, as now they head towards the bus stop chicane. For the sake of Bairden, he only needs to pull out about 1.4, maybe 1.5 seconds in the final lap in order to win, as there was Godux also overtaking Barros, and then just a bit further back is Boogie regaining P5 against Luke. But we are all back underway for the final lap of this Belgian GP. Who's going to win? Will it be Bairden? But if he does, he will have to do an amazing final lap to pull out of that 3-second margin between him and Sam. Or will it be Sam, maybe even Gadux? The McLaren, who sat second all race, has got a chance here down the Kemmel Straight to take the place from their teammate. They're going to stay in formation, however. Could it be Papaya Rules kicking into play here today, as it's going to be Sam who leads them down towards Bruxelles now? However, there's still time for that to all change around, but as things stand, McLaren flirting very much, in a way, a life or death situation over a possible 1-2 in the second race of the season. Gadux has to find some time, and Sam has to as well, for it to work, but Bairden does look like he is poised on to take this win. You can see it's 2.5 seconds at the moment. You've even got Barros all over the back of Gadux still. The Red Bull looking very, very racy as we speak, but Gadux has dropped to over 2 seconds back from Sam. Safe to assume he will have zero chance of getting a top 2. It'll be third at best. However, it's going to be Bairden that works their way up to the bus stop chicane, as just a bit further back is Luke, Dom and Ginge. We'll tune back in with them if they're still fighting, as overline will be Bairden, but it's going to be Sam who wins on track, as there's Luke and Ginge through that final corner. It's going to be Luke that comes on P6, but that all changes up due to penalties. Then it's Harvey 8th, Eclipse 9th, but it's a 1-2 for McLaren. Bairden clearly had more penalties than I thought. So it's going to be Sam who wins, then Gadux, then Barros on 16 lap old hards. Amazing time management, probably helped by those safety cars. And then it's Bairden in P4, Ginge 5th, Boogie 6th, Luke in 7th, Eclipse 8th, Harvey in 9th. Then you do have this Aston Martin heading up towards Blanchimont now. It's going to be P10 in the race for the Silverstone base team, as it's going to be at least 1 point for them, which could be revolutionary for their championship. However, I do not see too much to come out of it for them here today. That's 1 point for growing strong. And then last but not least is the AI of Oscar Piastri Volume 2. But it's Sam who goes back to back with the opening 2 events, and it's McLaren's first 1-2 this season, and we're only 2 races in. So it's already for McLaren taking it to a whole new level. They're definitely leaving the field in the dust with this championship. As you can see, there's Sam taking that winner's trophy. Race winner Sam, fastest lap for Oscar Piastri, Boogie as your driver of the day, then Luke, Dom, most overtakes, and your cleanest driver Gadux. As there's your final finishing order. It's Sam, Gadux, Barros, Bairden, Ginge, Boogie, Luke, Dom, Eclipse, Harvey Lee, Growing Strong, Oscar Piastri V2, then Strawberry, Hin and Forzies all failed to finish in terms of your your track limits. It's Sam, Bairden, Barros, Forzies, Hin, Sam, Hin, Boogie, Eclipse, Boogie, not Boogie again, Luke, and quite a few. But yeah, I'll just quickly flick through it because there's so many that happened there. But yeah, as a whole, hope you guys have enjoyed this round 2. And I'll see you all hopefully in a week's time, because I'm very much desperate to come back. Thank you for having me, but that's my night over and done with. So yeah, good night.